Views expressed are those of hosts, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of News Radio 1040 WHO.
Earlier this week, talking with former Secretary of State Schultz, and we were talking about victims' rights and restoring victims. And the story about a piece of legislation that was over the State House would deny parental rights for rapists to impregnate their victims was discussed, and it got some vigorous conversation. So it was with a great deal of interest amongst you. A number of you sent me little emails and text messages that, hey, you remember what you were talking about, the bill to restrict parental rights for rapists? I said, yeah. Well, one of the Republicans over at the State House blocked that legislation from going forward, and we can't figure out why. Well, I think we just ask him. Chip Baltimore is on our Newsmaker line. Representative Baltimore is on the committee. And is it correct that you were blocking that from coming out of committee?
Well, I think blocking is a little overly restrictive or definitive, but
okay.
let me just explain what happened.
All right.
There was a bill that was filed that was assigned to the House Judiciary Committee, and as I do with all the bills that are assigned there as chairman, it's my responsibility to read them first.
Right.
That's always helpful.
Yes.
Although many people out there really aren't reading the bill, but read it first and figure out whether it's good public policy or not, or if there are problems with it.
Right.
To see if the problems can be fixed and how to best fix them and move forward. So at the time that this came, I identified some challenges with it that were problems that I think that I thought needed to be fixed. And I talked to one of the co-sponsors of the bill, and I identified those to him and expressed my concern with it and suggested, okay, I don't have time in my day to fix every piece of legislation. I can certainly give suggestions on what
right.
needs to be done, but I can't individually
right.
Fix the dozens of bills that come into the committee. So
right.
I gave him
right.
some suggestions about my concerns and some suggestions to look at, and he understood and agreed that there were flaws in it that needed to be fixed. We talked about some ideas. He brought some proposals back and forth, and we never got to a point where we were comfortable with the concepts in the bill before the first funnel deadline, and so the bill died in the
right.
first funnel.
Okay, got it. All right.
So, I did not assign it to a subcommittee. I didn't want to assign it to a subcommittee until internally the bill sponsor and I had come to some sort of plan for how to fix the concerns that I had and the problems that I saw, because I wanted to get it as good as possible before we put it really into the full process.
Okay, so what was the hang-up, do you figure? I mean, what were some of the problems you were having?
Sure. Well, there were several problems. The bill itself had one small clarification that would have allowed for the termination of parental rights of a person that had been convicted of sexual abuse or sexual assault or rape.
Right.
That part was a no-brainer. I had no problems with that whatsoever.
Yes.
There were several other parts, however, that for instance, in instances of divorce, so somebody files for divorce, would have required, not allowed, but required a judge to stop visitation or temporary custody if the other parent simply filed a petition alleging that the child had been born as a result of a rape. Now, that's problematic on a number of.
You're talking about in a divorce situation.
In a divorce situation.
Okay.
So we're in a situation now where the alleged rapist and the alleged victim were married to each other or
right.
had a child together, but
right.
This is in divorce too.
Right.
And then they file for divorce. It could be 12 years later.
Right.
12, and they've lived in the same home for 12 years. The child has lived in the same home for 12 years.
Okay.
But if they start down the divorce proceeding and then somebody files simply filed a petition for termination of parental rights alleging that the other parent raped her,
right,
then at that point the court had to stop all visitation.
Simply on the allegation. Allegation was enough.
Simply on the allegation.
Okay.
I had a problem with that. I mean, the other part of that is that the bill in the termination of parental rights proceeding. So if the mother and the alleged victim filed the notice of, or filed the termination of parental rights matter, the bill would have excluded the alleged rapist, father, husband, from participating in that termination of parental rights if the mother attached an affidavit to the petition saying that she had evidence that the sexual assault had occurred.
Why? But just out of curiosity, why was the bill, which is, as you say, a no-brainer, just to deny somebody sitting in prison for a conviction for a sexual assault that results in a pregnancy? Mm-hmm. Nobody wants that person to have anything to do with it. But why would they attach all of these other things to that proper cause?
Well,
I don't understand why they're doing this.
Well, I think there's a couple of things to address there. Number one is we already have in the termination of parental rights statute a provision that says if somebody's sitting in prison and they're not anticipated to get out for a while, I think it's 5 years if I recall correctly, which if it's a traditional rape, not that there's ever a non-traditional rape, but it's the one that there's been a conviction for.
Yes, right.
That's what I meant by that. That's usually resulting in a prison sentence of longer than 5 years.
Right.
So that's already covered by the existing bill. This would have just clarified it specifically for the rape situation. So that's, there's already that part in there. The other part is they were trying to address these situations where, for one reason or another, the victim decides that they're not going to press charges, which I fully appreciate and understand. There are many times that victims do not want to press criminal charges for whatever reason.
Right.
But then they get into a custody battle later on over the child.
Right.
And so in that attempt, I think it was good. It was well intended by the bill sponsors to try to address that situation. The problem is that they just tromped all over due process.
Right.
In trying to do it.
Well, I can understand why you have trouble with removing legal rights or starting with the assumption that rights are conferred upon the mere accusation. That's not the way the system is supposed to work.
Right. So those were my main concerns with it, kind of in a nutshell. And I could.
And you said that
the language,
and you said that you've negotiated the language, but they didn't change the language. They didn't do anything.
Well, we talked about different ways that we could try to fix this part of it. Honestly, we could have stripped out all of the other parts and left in simply the convicted rapist part,
right,
and passed that. But I don't think that really would have gotten to the one of the core intentions of the bill, which was to, help those situations where the victim did not file criminal charges and there was no conviction, but yet it still occurred.
Well, and
which I fully appreciate and support that effort as well. It's just that we didn't do it very well in this bill.
Well, also, I would just like to observe there's several articles on this, some of them from blogs, some of them from the news sources, and none of them have the nuances, any of the concerns that you raise. It's all, hey, this guy is trying to block the restrictions against rapists being conferred parental rights, and that's pretty much the end of the story. So they're only halfway covering the concerns here.
Yeah, the media reports what the media reports, and we can't control that. I was contacted by a newspaper reporter that kind of started this whole thing, and this is a bill that obviously had not made it through the first funnel, which was virtually a month ago.
Right.
So, so we talked about it, and what got reported was a small fraction of the overall conversation, as often happens. And it's unfortunate that it's being mischaracterized the way it is.
Well, so eventually, it sounds like this is going to happen. It's going to get fixed, but it'll require some refining before you can move forward. And I think you've the way you've described it, it does need some refinement, because I don't think anybody wants the parental rights for rapists. Nobody does, and we don't have any by law in Iowa, but we don't have any law that says you can't. So this is what the people are worried, that since we don't have any law preventing it, some judge may just be fickle or whatever and decide to make mischief by conferring them. And this, I think, the legislation is designed to block that potential, right?
Well, I think the legislation is designed, number one, to slightly clarify the existing law about the convicted rapist.
Right.
Like I said, we already have a bill that says if you're in prison, and it really doesn't matter what the reason is, but if you're in prison for a while, that's grounds to terminate parental rights.
All right. So what do you predict?
Well, I predict that those people that want to continue to castigate me for blocking this bill, if you will, are going to continue to do it because it's a talking point. Too many people have made this into a Republican war on women issue, even though the sponsors of the bill were Republicans.
Yes,
which is ironic.
Yes,
or disingenuous, one of the two. But the other part of it is, I think that we're going to continue to try to refine the part about when a victim does not file charges or there is no conviction. And it doesn't make any sense to me to allow or have somebody claiming rape, several years after the alleged event,
right?
If they've all been living together and cohabitating as a family, and then you get into a divorce situation.
Well, see, I can see this because in other areas, when it comes to custody issues, I've actually read about seminars being given for attorneys who advise their clients to, in a slightly different arena, say, well, you have a better chance of support or child custody if there is an allegation of abuse. So even if there isn't abuse, the allegation is sufficient to tip the process. The allegations being the key word there, and when you say that the allegations are enough to confer this status in this kind of an arena, that should raise a lot of red flags, and I'm glad that you saw them and acted upon them, Representative Baltimore.
Well, I appreciate that, Jan. We all in this building work very, very hard to do the right thing, and we may disagree at times over what that may be, but I think we are all very well intentioned down here, and the thing that we need to protect, in my opinion, more than anything else, is the process.
We have
to protect not the legislative process, but really specifically the judicial process, and that's our Constitution provided for that, because those founding fathers understood how important it was to have due process. And
I'm it's nobody in any level of government, especially when you have the custody of children or your life or property in danger, nobody should have to prove their innocence in our form of government. And it sounds like this would be another way of shifting the burden of proof to the person who's accused, and that's not the way our system is supposed to work either.
Well, actually, under parts of this bill, you would be precluded from being able to prove you're innocent, because this bill,
because you're not allowed to participate.
Right. This bill said that if you are alleged to have committed a sexual assault, then you are not a necessary party to the termination of parental rights, and you don't have to be served or given notice of the hearing.
Well, that's outrageous. That really is outrageous.
That's kind of what I thought.
All right. Representative Baltimore, thank you very much for being there. Some of the heat that is headed your way, in fact, on the basis of what we've heard so far, none of the heat that has been directed your way is justified, and I wish that the story had been covered with a little more balance. I appreciate your time this morning, sir.
Well, thank you so much for having me on, Jan. I appreciate the opportunity and encourage the debate.
Hey, thanks a lot, sir. Appreciate it.
Thanks.